My younger sister calmly informed me that she and her family would be moving into my spare bedroom for a few weeks, and that I had plenty of time to figure out somewhere else to stay. I actually laughed because I thought it was one of those terrible jokes she tells with a straight face. Then a moving truck pulled into my parking lot. That's when I realized she had never been asking for permission in the first place. I'm 37 years old, and I work as a financial systems manager for a regional manufacturing company. My entire career revolves around budgets, forecasts, and catching expensive mistakes before they happen. I trust numbers far more than people's promises. Numbers don't exaggerate. They don't guilt trip you. If the account balance says $5,163.42, then that's exactly what it is. It doesn't magically become basically enough, because someone wants it to. 3 years ago, I bought my own 2-bedroom condo after saving for nearly a decade. It wasn't glamorous, but it was mine. Every payment came from my paycheck. Every improvement was something I planned and budgeted for. I knew exactly how much was left on the mortgage, how much I paid in HOA dues, and how much I needed in my emergency fund to sleep well at night. Owning that place wasn't just a financial achievement. It was the first time in my life I truly felt secure. I'm the oldest of 3 siblings. My sister Lauren is 35 and my younger brother Tyler just turned 30. Growing up, money was always tight. Our parents worked hard, but there was never enough of it. I became the responsible kid almost by default. While other teenagers worried about school dances, I was organizing unpaid bills on the kitchen counter because my parents couldn't keep track of what was due. "You're the dependable one," my mom used to tell me whenever she handed me paperwork she didn't understand. At the time, I thought she was proud of me. Looking back, I realized I was simply the family problem solver. Not much has changed. My parents still call whenever they can't figure out an online payment or need help balancing their accounts. Tyler has a habit of borrowing small amounts of money that somehow never make their way back to me. And Lauren figured out years ago that if her kids were part of the conversation, I'd almost always cave. She has 4 children, all under 11, and I genuinely love being their uncle. That's what made saying no so difficult. Every conversation eventually turned into the same complaint. "You don't understand how expensive everything is now," she'd sigh. "It's different when you're only responsible for yourself." She wasn't entirely wrong. I don't have children. But I do have a demanding career, a mortgage, and financial responsibilities that don't disappear just because someone else's life gets complicated. About 2 years ago, she called me crying late one evening. "If we're short on rent this month, the landlord said he'll start the eviction process," she sobbed. "Please, just this once. The kids can't go through that." I wired her the money without hesitating. A month later, she needed help again. Then it was the electric bill. Then school supplies. Then unexpected car repairs. Every emergency sounded temporary. I even created a spreadsheet to keep track of everything I loaned her because I honestly believed we'd settle it once things improved. Instead, the total kept climbing. By the time I finally added everything together, she'd borrowed over $7,000. Whenever I carefully mentioned paying even a small portion back, she'd immediately make me feel selfish. "I'm not asking for charity," she'd insist. "It's a loan. We'll pay you back when we're back on our feet." Then she'd add the line that always made me feel guilty. "You have stability. It's easier for you to say no." The truth was, I never actually did. Around that same time, Lauren asked if she could have a spare key to my condo. "It would only be for emergencies," she explained. "What if something happened to you? Someone should be able to check on the place. Besides, I could water your plants if you're away." It sounded reasonable. She was family. So I handed her the extra key without thinking much about it. Almost immediately, my condo stopped feeling like my private space. The kids would show up after school without warning. Lauren treated my kitchen like it was stocked for everyone, and my guest room slowly became a place where her family seemed completely comfortable spending hours at a time. At first, I convinced myself I was overreacting. I had no idea that spare key was about to become a much bigger problem. At first, I told myself I was making too much of it. I genuinely enjoyed spending time with my nieces and nephews. They weren't the problem. The problem was how every little exception slowly became the new normal. The spare key stopped being for emergencies. Then my streaming account somehow became the kids' favorite place to watch movies. My pantry became the family's backup grocery store. Every small favor came with the assumption that I'd never say no. Each incident by itself seemed harmless. Together, they painted a picture I kept trying to ignore because admitting it would make me feel like the bad guy. One thing I've learned about being the dependable person in a family is this. People stop seeing your generosity as generosity. Eventually, they start treating it like an obligation. The first time I realized something bigger was happening came one night in early spring. Lauren texted me out of nowhere. "Lauren, random question. What do you even use your second bedroom for?" "Me, mostly my office." "Lauren, seriously? That's such a waste. You're not even working from home every day." I answered honestly. "I like having the extra space." She never responded. I should have recognized that conversation for what it was. Instead, I forgot about it. A few days later, my parents invited everyone over for Sunday dinner. Nothing unusual. My dad overcooked the roast like always, the kids were racing through the house, and the television was providing background noise that nobody paid attention to. Halfway through dinner, Lauren tapped her fork against her water glass. "We've made a decision." Everyone looked at her. "We're moving in with Ethan for a few months." I laughed. I honestly assumed she meant somewhere nearby. "You found an apartment close to me?" "No," she said casually. "Into your condo." I blinked. "My condo?" "Your guest room," she corrected, as if I were the one getting the details wrong. "Just until we save up some money." Then she launched into her explanation. Their landlord was increasing the rent again. Finding another place big enough for 4 kids was impossible. If they could stay with me for just 3 months, they could pay off several $1,000s in debt and finally get ahead financially. Everyone around the table started nodding before I'd said a single word. My mother smiled. "That actually works out perfectly." I looked around the room. Had I missed part of this conversation? I never agreed to that. Lauren sighed dramatically. "It's really not a huge sacrifice. We'll pay extra for utilities. We'll buy groceries. We're not asking you to support us." Marcus finally spoke up. "Come on, man." He leaned toward me like we were negotiating a business deal. "If we don't have rent for a few months, we can wipe out almost $5,000 in debt. After that, we'll be back on our feet." I'd heard some version of back on our feet for years. Every time things were supposedly about to improve, another emergency somehow appeared. The part that bothered me wasn't even the request. It was the fact that everyone else seemed convinced the decision had already been made. "You should have asked me before making plans," I finally said. Lauren shrugged. "If we'd asked first, you would have overanalyzed everything. You always do. This is what families do for each other." Then she smiled. "The kids are so excited. They've been calling it their giant sleepover." That sentence hit me harder than anything else. She had already promised them. Without ever asking me. When I hesitated, she rolled her eyes. "Don't make this weird." That phrase had followed me my entire life. Whenever I expressed discomfort, whenever I wanted boundaries, whenever I wasn't immediately willing to fix someone else's problem, I was told I was making things weird. From her perspective, I was a single guy with an extra bedroom I wasn't using. From mine, I was being pressured into sharing an 850-square-foot home that I'd spent years working toward with 6 additional people. Those were 2 very different realities. When I got home that night, I did what I always do whenever life gets messy. I opened Excel. One spreadsheet tracked every dollar I'd already loaned Lauren. Another estimated what living together would actually cost me. Food alone would increase dramatically. Utilities would jump. Parking would become an issue. Furniture would wear out faster. There would be endless miscellaneous expenses that nobody ever thinks about until they're happening. But after staring at the numbers for almost an hour, I realized something. The money wasn't what bothered me the most. It was the assumption that my home was available simply because I'd never enforced clear boundaries before. Unfortunately, that wasn't the end of it. Over the next couple of weeks, Lauren stopped talking as if moving in were an idea. She talked as though it were already scheduled. "I told the kids they'll finally live close to Uncle Ethan. Can you send me your HOA's move-in paperwork? How many parking passes can we get? We'll probably need 2 spaces for a while." Every message sounded less like a question, and more like logistics for a plan I'd supposedly approved. I kept replying with the same sentence. "We need to sit down and actually discuss this." She never answered that part. No matter how many times I said we needed to discuss it first, Lauren always brushed it aside. "Relax," she'd text. "It's only temporary. We'll figure everything out." Except nothing was actually being figured out. She had already decided. Then one afternoon I was scrolling through Facebook during lunch when I nearly dropped my phone. Lauren had posted, "Big changes ahead. Feeling so thankful for family who open their homes when life gets difficult. Red heart #blessed #fresh start." The comments started rolling in almost immediately. "Your brother is amazing. Family always comes through. Those kids are lucky to have an uncle like that." I stared at the screen. I hadn't agreed to a single thing. Not once. That was the moment the anxiety really kicked in. For the next several mornings I woke up before 5 with my heart pounding. I'd lie there imagining my quiet condo completely transformed. 4 kids fighting over the bathroom before school. My home office filled with bunk beds instead of computer monitors. Trying to lead work meetings while toddlers cried in the background. My refrigerator constantly empty. My weekends no longer my own. And maybe the part that scared me most was knowing exactly how the story would be told if I eventually said no. I wouldn't be the guy protecting his own home. I'd become the selfish brother who threw his family out. People who feel entitled usually tell the first version of the story. And somehow they're often believed. Fortunately, there was one thing Lauren couldn't simply assume into existence. The legal side. My condo association has strict occupancy rules. The building only allows a limited number of permanent residents per unit. Long-term guests require approval. I'm the only owner listed on the deed, mortgage, and HOA records. No one could legally move in without my written permission. Lauren simply acted as though that permission already existed. A few days later my mom sent another message in the family group chat. Have you talked to your manager about working from home more once the kids move in? Even she spoke as if the decision had already been finalized. That was the moment I realized hoping this would quietly disappear wasn't a strategy. I needed actual advice. A friend recommended an attorney who regularly dealt with housing and property issues. After listening to the entire situation, he leaned back in his chair. Let me guess, he said. You're the responsible sibling. I laughed. Is it that obvious? It usually is. Then he explained something I already suspected but desperately needed to hear from someone with no emotional investment. They have absolutely no right to occupy your home without your permission. If they begin using that spare key after you've withdrawn consent, that's unauthorized access. And if they establish residency before you stop it. He paused. Things become much more complicated. So the time to set boundaries is now. Before a single moving box comes through your front door. I hesitated before asking the question that had been bothering me the entire time. But morally, am I a terrible person if I refuse? He didn't answer immediately. Finally he said, the children aren't responsible for this situation. But neither are you. The parents should never have promised housing they didn't actually have. You're not abandoning them. You're refusing to become the solution to problems they created without your consent. That sentence stayed with me all the way home. For the first time in weeks, I felt like someone had given me permission to protect my own life. So I did what I always do when I'm overwhelmed. I made a plan. First, I scheduled a locksmith and replaced every lock on my condo. Then I notified my HOA that no one besides me had authorization to occupy the unit. Next, I decided something I'd been avoiding for far too long. The monthly financial support had to end. Finally, I drafted an email. Not because I wanted to hide behind a screen, but because I wanted every word documented. No misunderstandings. No rewriting history later. The email read, I've spent a lot of time thinking about the idea of you moving into my condo. I understand that you're under financial pressure, and I truly hope things improve. However, after reviewing both my building's occupancy rules and my own personal boundaries, I need to be completely clear. I am not agreeing to have anyone move into my home. My second bedroom is not available, whether it's for a few weeks or several months. I can still help in a limited way. I'm willing to contribute $500 toward a security deposit, moving expenses, or temporary accommodations if there's a short gap between leases. Beyond that, I'll also be ending the monthly financial assistance I've been providing because I need to focus on my own budget moving forward. I love you and the kids, but I have to protect my home and my financial stability. I read it over several times. Removed anything that sounded defensive. Added anything that sounded compassionate. Then I hit send. 2 minutes later, my phone exploded. Lauren texted first. So this is how you're doing it? By email? I replied with one sentence. I wanted everything to be clear. I can't believe you're hiding behind HOA rules, she fired back. The kids were already excited. This is unbelievably cruel. Then the family group chat lit up. Mom, can't you just help for a little while? We didn't raise you to turn your back on family. Lauren, delete that email. You're making it sound like I'm begging. Marcus, come on man. This is ice cold. I stared at my phone. Something told me that sending the email wasn't going to end the situation. It had only started the real fight. I didn't get pulled into the argument. I replied with one sentence. I'm not letting anyone move into my condo. I've already offered the help I'm willing to give. My decision isn't changing. Then I stopped responding. That same evening I followed through on the plan I'd made. A locksmith replaced every exterior lock and reprogrammed my electronic keypad. The spare key Lauren had been carrying for nearly 2 years was officially useless. For the first time in weeks I felt like I had at least regained control over my own front door. Unfortunately, that feeling didn't last long. 3 days later, around 10 on Saturday morning, my neighbor called. "Hey, is everything okay?" "What do you mean?" "There's a moving truck outside. Your sister's here telling everyone she's moving into your place." For a second I honestly thought he had to be mistaken. Then I looked out my living room window. A large moving truck was parked directly in front of the building. 2 movers were already unloading furniture. My stomach dropped. So this was really happening. I took one deep breath before opening my front door. Lauren was standing in the hallway directing the movers like she'd done this 100 times. The second she saw me, she smiled. "There you are." She gestured toward the boxes. "Can you open the door a little wider? We're blocking the hallway." Instead, I stepped outside and quietly pulled my condo door shut behind me. "No." She froze. "What?" "Stop." I wasn't yelling. I didn't need to. Something about my tone finally made her realize I wasn't playing along anymore. Her expression immediately hardened. "What is wrong with you?" "You read my email," I answered. "I already told you that you aren't moving into my home." She waved her hand dismissively. "That ridiculous email? You were stressed. We already talked about this at Mom and Dad's. Everyone agreed. You can't suddenly back out." I looked at her. "I never agreed. Not once." She acted like I'd said something completely unreasonable. "Don't be dramatic. We packed everything. We gave notice on our apartment. We literally don't have anywhere else to go." Marcus walked over carrying the same calm, friendly tone he always used whenever he wanted something. "Come on, Ethan. We already told the kids. You really want them thinking their uncle chose an office over family?" There it was. The guilt. Exactly as I'd expected. Oddly enough, I wasn't angry anymore. I was exhausted. The kind of exhausted that comes from explaining the same boundary over and over until you stop recognizing your own voice. "I'm not making your family homeless," I said as calmly as I could. "You chose to give notice before you had another place to live. You made that decision without my permission." Lauren's eyes immediately filled with tears. "You'd really do this in front of strangers?" She glanced toward the movers. "You honestly don't care if your nieces and nephews end up sleeping in the car?" The lead mover awkwardly looked away, pretending to inspect one of the furniture straps. He clearly wanted no part of our family drama. I pulled my phone from my pocket. "I do care. That's why I offered to help pay for a hotel. My offer is still there. I'll cover temporary accommodations. But you're not moving into my condo." Lauren suddenly reached into her purse and pulled out the spare key. "You can't just lock family out." "I have a key." She held it up triumphantly. I almost felt relieved she'd brought it up herself. "I know. That's why I changed every lock 3 days ago." Her face completely changed. "What?" "The key doesn't work anymore. You've never lived here. You aren't on the deed. You aren't on the HOA paperwork. You don't have any legal right to enter my home." Marcus took a step closer. "You seriously talked to a lawyer?" "Yes. I also informed my HOA that nobody else has permission to occupy my unit. If anyone tries moving in without my consent, building security will treat it as trespassing." For the first time that morning, neither of them had a response. Until Lauren finally exploded. "I cannot believe you. After everything I've done for you. I've watched your dog. I've invited you to every birthday party." For one brief second I almost laughed. Watching my dog a few times somehow outweighed thousands of dollars I'd loaned her? Instead I stayed calm. "Over the last year and a half I've loaned you more than $7,000. I've babysat. I've left work early to pick up your kids from school. I gave you that spare key because I trusted you. It was for emergencies. It was never permission to turn my home into your family's backup housing plan." The hallway went completely silent. Even the movers stopped pretending not to listen. And I could feel that everything was about to get even worse. "I'm done pretending this is all a misunderstanding," I said quietly. Lauren immediately shook her head. "That's not what happened. You're rewriting everything." For the first time, I didn't argue from memory. I argued with receipts. I unlocked my phone and opened our message history. On April 2nd, you texted me asking what I used my second bedroom for. I scrolled. 5 days later, You announced at Mom and Dad's house that your family was moving into my condo. Another scroll. Then on April 15th I sent you a written email clearly saying no. And despite all of that, I looked at the moving truck outside. You hired movers anyway. This isn't confusion. It's you refusing to accept the word no. The hallway became incredibly quiet. Even the movers suddenly found fascinating reasons to reorganize boxes at the other end of the corridor. Lauren realized guilt wasn't working anymore, so she changed strategies. She looked at me with fake concern. Ethan, this isn't like you. You've been acting strange lately. Always talking about boundaries. Always saying you're stressed. She tilted her head. Did your therapist convince you to do this? I surprised even myself with how calmly I answered. Yes. She blinked. Therapy helped me realize I'm allowed to have a home that doesn't belong to everyone else. For a second she just stared at me. Then I decided to make one final offer. This is what I'm willing to do. I'll send you $500 today. I'll pay for hotel rooms for the next 3 nights. I'll even spend tomorrow helping you contact landlords and work through your budget. I paused. But you're not moving into my condo. Not today. Not next week. Not next month. Her face hardened. So that's it. You're seriously going to watch your family leave with nowhere to go? Marcus muttered just loudly enough for me to hear. We never should have trusted him. I looked from the truck to the pile of furniture and back at both of them. No. I'm watching 2 adults deal with the consequences of a decision they made without my permission. You have a moving truck. You both have jobs. You both have phones. You have options. What you don't have. I glanced toward my front door. Is my spare bedroom. I wasn't trying to punish them. I wasn't trying to get revenge. For the first time in my life, I was simply refusing responsibility for someone else's choices. I opened a hotel booking app and held my phone toward Lauren. The offer is still available. Do you want me to reserve the rooms? She didn't answer immediately. I could almost see her weighing the options. She accepted my help. She'd have to admit I'd actually offered it. If she refused, she could keep telling everyone I'd abandoned her. Finally she stepped back. We'll figure it out ourselves. Keep your money. As she pushed past me, her shoulder clipped mine. I barely reacted. A few minutes later I heard Marcus explaining to the movers that there had been a problem with the building and asking about temporary storage. Then while standing near the truck I overheard something else. Yeah. We'll head back to my mom's for now. I almost laughed. So they did have somewhere to stay. It just wasn't my condo. I closed my front door, locked it, then sat down on my couch. For several minutes I just listened to the silence. I hadn't realized how much I'd missed hearing absolutely nothing. That peace lasted maybe 20 minutes. Then my phone exploded. The family group chat lit up. Lauren posted first. Well, Ethan just slammed the door in our faces after promising we'd stay with him. The kids are devastated. We honestly don't know what we're going to do. Mom responded almost immediately. Ethan, please tell me this isn't true. Dad added. I never thought you'd treat your own sister like this. 6 months earlier, I would have called everyone individually. I would have apologized for sounding harsh. I would have tried to explain myself until I was emotionally exhausted. This time, I did something different. I simply uploaded screenshots. First, my email clearly refusing permission. Then the messages offering financial help. Then I wrote one final response. I said no several days ago. I offered money for a hotel and moving expenses. I changed the locks because the spare key was for emergencies, not permanent access. They chose to ignore all of that and arrive with movers anyway. I'm not discussing this any further. Mom still replied with a long message about family coming before rules and how I'd never understand because I didn't have children. Then something happened I never expected. My younger brother, Tyler, finally spoke. Honestly, Mom, Ethan's been helping them financially for years. Maybe they should have asked before planning to move into his place. I stared at my screen. I actually read his message twice. Tyler, the same brother who usually avoided every family conflict, was defending me. Lauren clearly wasn't expecting it either. She immediately started messaging him privately. Only, she accidentally posted one of those messages in the family group chat instead. The screenshot called Tyler a traitor for taking my side. That single mistake changed the entire conversation. For the first time, everyone could see exactly how she reacted whenever someone didn't give her what she wanted. The confrontation outside my condo wasn't the end of the story. It was only the beginning. Over the next several weeks, the pressure came in waves. First came the guilt. Don't be surprised when the kids grow up thinking you abandoned them. One day you'll regret choosing an empty room over your own family. When guilt stopped working, anger took its place. Lauren called me selfish, cold, emotionless. According to her, I cared more about square footage than people. Then came the public version. She started posting vague messages on Facebook about discovering who your real family is when life gets hard. There were plenty of comments from people who had no idea what had actually happened. I didn't respond. Not online. Not privately. For once, I refused to defend myself against the story someone else had invented. Instead, I protected my peace. I muted the family group chat. I created email filters that automatically sent messages containing words like heartless, homeless, or disappointed into a folder I never opened. The HOA confirmed they had documented that no additional residents were authorized to occupy my condo. Building security had been informed as well. Even the locksmith's invoice, almost $1,200 after replacing every lock and access device, felt less like an expense and more like an investment. I also canceled the automatic $350 transfer I'd been sending Lauren every month. Instead of sending that money to her, I redirected it into a savings account I jokingly named Peace of Mind Fund. Ironically, it became the first savings account that actually improved my mental health. A couple of weeks later, I started seeing a therapist who specialized in family dynamics and chronic people-pleasing. After I explained everything, I admitted something that embarrassed me. I still feel guilty. I know I made the right decision. But saying no makes me physically sick. She nodded like she'd heard that sentence 1,000 times before. You're experiencing withdrawal. I frowned. Withdrawal? You've spent years believing your value comes from fixing everyone else's problems. When you finally stop, your brain interprets healthy boundaries as cruelty. I sat quietly for a moment before asking, so, am I the villain here? She smiled gently. To the family system that depended on your constant sacrifices? Probably. But to yourself? No. You're simply refusing to carry responsibilities that never belonged to you. That conversation changed something inside me. The drama didn't disappear overnight. It simply lost its power. Lauren stopped contacting me altogether. Mom occasionally sent articles about forgiveness, generosity, or the importance of family without adding a single comment. Dad called once. You know your sister's really struggling. So am I answered. There was a long silence. Then he awkwardly changed the subject to football. After that, life slowly became quiet again. I kept paying my mortgage. My second bedroom remained exactly what I'd always wanted it to be. A home office. I slept through the night more often. I stopped checking my phone every time it buzzed. The strange thing was, nothing catastrophic happened. The disaster everyone predicted never arrived. About 9 months later, I ran into Lauren at a mutual friend's child's birthday party. It was the first time we'd spoken since the moving truck incident. The kids were running around covered in frosting, completely unaware of the adult's history. Lauren looked tired. Older somehow. But she also looked settled. After a few minutes of awkward small talk, she finally said, we ended up renting a townhouse farther outside the city. It's more expensive than we wanted. Marcus's mom had to co-sign. But we're managing. I'm glad, I said honestly. There was another long pause. Then she looked at me. You really blindsided me that day. I couldn't help it. I sent you an email. She laughed quietly. I know. Then she admitted something I'd suspected all along. You've always changed your mind before. I figured, eventually you'd give in. There it was. Not confusion. Not miscommunication. Expectation. She never misunderstood my answer. She simply believed my boundaries would collapse the way they always had. That realization brought me an unexpected sense of peace. The person I'd almost betrayed wasn't my sister. It was myself. For years I'd mistaken guilt for kindness. I'd confused rescuing people with loving them. And I'd allowed temporary favors to become permanent expectations because I was terrified of being seen as selfish. Before we left the party, Lauren quietly said, the kids still ask about you. That one hurt. I miss them too. And I'd love to spend time with them. I paused before adding, but I will never again be responsible for housing 6 people. She looked at me for a second. That's harsh. I shook my head. No. It's clear. There's a difference. I still wonder if I could have handled some conversations differently. Maybe I should have been firmer the very first time she hinted about my spare bedroom instead of assuming she'd respect my silence. Maybe changing the locks before the moving truck arrived felt extreme. But looking back, every boundary I set came only after months of ignored conversations, financial help, and repeated assumptions that my home belonged to everyone but me. So, AITA for refusing to let my sister move her entire family into my condo and changing the locks before they showed up with movers?